Okay, next we're going to talk about solving trinomials using the quadratic formula. Sometimes you can't use the diamond because there aren't two integers that multiply to get the top and add to get the bottom. So in this case, we've got to use what's called the quadratic formula. And that states if it's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then the zeros or x-intercepts of a parabola can be found using x equals, and we read this as negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now let's look at how this formula applies, because it looks a lot more complicated than it is. So 2x squared minus 3x minus 4 equals 0. We still need to know what a, b, and c are. So a is still the number in front of x squared, which is 2, b is negative 3, and c is negative 4. Now what I like to do is go through and write this formula putting parentheses where all the letters are. So I got x equals parentheses negative parentheses for the b plus or minus, again I got parentheses for the b squared minus 4 parentheses for a and c all over 2, and then parentheses for a on the bottom. Now again, in the formula this 4 is always there, this 2 is always there, same thing with this minus sign outside the parentheses. Now if we go and plug it in, so b goes here and here, and b is negative 3. A goes here and here, and a is 2. And c is negative 4. Now let's do some simplifying. The opposite is basically how you can read this, as the opposite of negative 3. Well, that's a positive 3, plus or minus. Now if I take negative 3 squared, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. And then I treat this as negative 4 times 2 times negative 4. Well, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 4 is positive 32. So now I've got 3 plus or minus 9 plus 32 is 41. 2 times 2 is 4. Now, if we don't know what the square root is, in other words, it's not like an integer, then we just leave our answer as in that form where it'd be 3 plus or minus square root of 41 over 4. Now the second example over here, x squared plus 4x minus 12 equals 0. So a is 1, b is 4, c is negative 12. So again, I write out my quadratic formula, again putting parentheses where all the letters are. So again, b goes here and here, so b is 4. A goes here and here, a is 1, and c is negative 12. So the opposite of 4, so x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root. 4 squared is 16. Then again, I treat this as negative 4 times 1 times negative 12. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4, times negative 12 is positive 48. 16 plus 48 is 64, all over 2. Now, we know what the square root of 64 is, and that's 8. Now, if it comes down to where you know what this square root is, and it's no big deal, it actually makes the problem a little bit easier, that means we could have actually factored this. But that's okay, we didn't see that. So the square root of 64 is 8. So that means I got x equals negative 4 plus or minus 8 divided by 2. Now the plus or minus means there's two different answers. So I got x equals negative 4 plus 8 over 2 and negative 4 minus 8 over 2. Negative 4 plus 8 is positive 4 divided by 2, which is 2. Negative 4 minus 8 is negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. Anytime you come out with two integers here, that means you could have factored it. That's okay. You need to understand both ways. So x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. So a is 1, b is negative 5, c is negative 3. So we got x equals negative, parentheses for b, plus or minus, parentheses for b minus 4, parentheses for a and c, all over 2a. So b is negative 5, so I got negative 5, negative 5. A again is 1, c is negative 3. So x equals the opposite of negative 5, which is positive 5, plus or minus negative 5 squared is 25. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 3. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Times negative 3 is positive 12. 25 plus 12 is 37, all over 2. And again, that one works out. Or the square root doesn't work out, so we're done. Example 4, 4x squared plus 10x minus 2 equals 0. A is 4, B is 10, and C is negative 2. So again, x equals negative parentheses plus or minus square root of parentheses squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So b is 10, so b goes here and here. A is 4, C is negative 2. So x equals the opposite of 10 is negative 10, plus or minus 10 squared is 100. Negative 4 times 4 is negative 16. Negative 16 times negative 2 is positive 32. So the square root of 132 divided by 8. So if you don't know, check and see if the square root of 132 is an integer, and it's not. So we can just leave it as that if this is not able to be simplified. Now, we're going to go ahead and leave it like this. Later on, you may have a teacher that talks about, or I may talk about, how to simplify radicals. But in general, a good rule of thumb is if you don't know what the square root of this is, just leave it.